So the Wall Street Journal just wrote an article about the WNBA, and it is one of the worst things I've ever read. Like, it's behind a paywall, so I'm not going to be showing the full article here. But I did read it, and it is legitimately, of WNBA media, one of the worst things I've read. Like, it comes off as something that the horoscope writer would say. Like, you know, the ominous crowd. Like, it was one of the worst things that I've read for the WNBA. And I think it not only was completely disrespectful towards certain players in the league, I thought that it's one of those situations where it's so badly written that it doesn't come off well for either Angel Reese or A'ja Wilson either. Because for me, I'm always of the opinion where if you want to diminish somebody, it's going to make the person you are diminishing somebody else on behalf of look bad too. And yeah, this was the article that's being shared. It was one of the worst things I've read. So the one thing is like, if you want to talk about the growth of the WNBA, it's bad faith to not talk about Caitlyn Clark. But if you're just sick of it and you just want to talk about, statistics, you want to talk about numbers, cool. This post here is not exactly true. It says here the article didn't mention Clark a single time. It did, in fact, say, as basically just a throwaway line, that of the 23 games that have had over 1 million views, Clark played in 19 of them. Or it's like 21 or whatever it is. I think it was like 2 without Clark in the regular season. But it had an entire paragraph about how, you know, the Aces played the Chicago Sky, and it was an entire thing about how the Aces had to move arenas when they played the Chicago Sky, and how A'ja Wilson and Angel Reese are really the real reason for the growth of the game. And I'm like, dude, they did it for the Fever as well, and they sold more tickets against the Fever. They got more viewers against the Fever. I don't know, but like, and also, this is where I have a real big issue with this article, is it mentioned Caitlyn, it talked about Caitlyn Clark realistically twice. It said literally, the growth of women's basketball started in the championship game because Angel Reese won and did the You Can't See Me. First of all, I don't think the trash talk You Can't See Me on the court is that bad, but I do think her going on IG Live being like, this is for you, Caitlyn Clark. Like, there's a difference between, for me, that's like, for people being like, why I disliked A'ja Reese in that scenario. Why, like, look, I have a respect for what Angel Reese is doing. I know you may not like it, but that's realistically the way she is. She's one of those lover or hater type like personas, and I was very much that in my 2K days. Like, even still right now, I'm the type of person where it's like, you're either going to be a fan of me or you're going to absolutely despise me. There's very little like in between there. And so I don't mind that. Like, she plays hard. I actually kind of like when Angel Reese isn't trying to shoot 25 shots a game. I like her game. But I didn't like and then obviously trash talk during a game happens. I don't really care. But when you go on IG Live and start going, this is to you, Caitlyn Clark. This is for you, Caitlyn Clark. Afterwards, I'm like, that's not a great one. But either way, do people not realize there's a reason we were watching the game in the first place? People don't realize Caitlyn Clark had a 40-point triple-double against Louisville. She then played South Carolina, which at that time was the record viewers in a game. And then she beat South Carolina and had 40. And everyone was watching this game to watch Caitlyn Clark. Like, that, realistically, people showed a one Angel Reese clip where she like blocked someone with her foot off, being like, this was Angel Reese. She was popular before Caitlyn Clark. She had one clip. She wasn't on no, you will not find any sort of sports center or anything saying one word about Angel Reese before that game. Everyone watched that game for Caitlyn Clark. And in fairness, a lot of people came out of that game becoming fans of Angel Reese. Ironically, not for basketball, which is the worst part about it. And that game was not the catalyst. We can't forget, the next year, there were more viewers. I think there were more viewers when Caitlyn played Paige, and there were even more viewers when Caitlyn played South Carolina. Like, to say that the national championship, and this was the reason, and also, by the way, also in the article they said, the growth of the sport was because of racism. Like, what are you talking about? The growth of the sport is because there's someone pulling from 30. Like, what are you talking about? People were like, oh, Arike was doing that before Caitlyn. You could find 7 shots of Arike pulling from 30 in college. You might find that. That was Caitlyn against LSU in one game. That was the problem, is she was literally getting seasons worth of highlights in games. And that's why people were tuning in. Like, you were getting 4-minute long highlight play montages from individual games from Caitlyn Clark in her championship run. You knew every time you turned on the TV to see Caitlyn Clark, you were going to see 4 to 5 30-footers, 3 to 4 crazy passes, and a team playing at a breakneck pace. That is why Iowa had viewers. It was nothing to do with racism. And to say the only reason that they literally said, like not literally said, they implied that the reason why Caitlyn Clark and was pulling in record viewers because of racism. I'm like, dude, they play. Why was then? If that was the case, then why was Iowa versus UConn more viewed than Iowa versus LSU? Explain that. Genuinely, I want them to explain that. Because UConn's 2 best players were Nika Mule, who's Croatian, and Paige Beckers. And the same with, to be fair, the same with the with South Carolina. Their best player was Brazilian. But idiots being idiots, I guess. And then afterwards, like, when they talked about Caitlyn Clark, they literally just diminished. They just, for some reason, decided while talking about the growth of WNBA to mention the fact that, you know, Caitlyn Clark was fouled twice. She was flagrantly fouled more than twice as much as any other player. But, you know, a couple of years ago, she was flagrantly fouled 6 times. You know, there was a couple of years ago that a player was flagrantly fouled 5 times. The reality is that if you look at the flagrant fouls Caitlyn had, in fairness, a couple of them were landing zone fouls. And some of the like hard hits that people are going to complain about, like the Stewie screen, the Jonquel Jones screen, they were just hard hits. But like Caitlyn Clark got shoved in the back. She got cheap shotted. Alyssa Thomas shoulder barged her. That wasn't called as a flagrant. She was 100% concussed against Connecticut that time in the regular season. She literally got up and stumbled. I don't know how she was allowed to play basketball again. She just got shoulder barged to the face. She's been hit with so many landing zone fouls. I don't understand how. Like, realistically, if all the actual flagrants that were called on Caitlyn were called, it was probably 11 or 12. And then obviously, like, again, even unintentional, the eye poke is a flagrant one. You can't do that. Like, you can't just swing your arm, like, recklessly. Like, even without intent, it's a flagrant one. So you're looking at realistically 11 to 12 flagrant fouls that should have been called in Caitlyn. And yes, people are going to want to bring up the Jordan Canada situation where she clocked Jordan Canada in the head on the break. Obviously, that was a flagrant one. Terrible call by the referees. There. Her getting Dejanay back by her flail hitting the head, probably a flagrant one. Yes, Caitlyn Clark probably has 2 flagrant ones from flailing after getting hit. But if the refs just called the fouls, if Caitlyn Clark didn't have to flop and flail and the refs would actually blow their whistle, you wouldn't be seeing the flails. But yes, the Jordan Canada one was obvious. But there's a big problem in that. And I have a really big problem. Like, I understand if there are people that are sick of Caitlyn Clark and they want to talk about the growth of the WNBA. And because even without the Caitlyn Clark effect, the league is still growing, if they want to talk about that. But to imply that A'ja Wilson and Angel Reese are the real reasons for the growth of the WNBA, to only mention Caitlyn Clark in a negative light, like, realistically, only mentioning, did the bare minimum have, like, throwaway lines about Caitlyn Clark. And if you're going to not mention Caitlyn Clark, I'm not even, like, at this stage, I don't even care. I don't even care if you're not going to mention Caitlyn Clark. But if you're going to make sure as hell you only mention Caitlyn Clark in a negative way and basically imply, you know, all of her fans are racists, as a big, like, as again, a like proper publication in a post where you've got A'ja Wilson and Angel Reese, so people are going to read it. Like, that's reckless journalism. And like, look, the WNBA want Christine Brennan fired for, I will say this, the first question of her asking about the eye poke, I don't really care. I don't think that's the end of the world. But you could tell that when she was like saying the 3 to the dome celebration, was laughing about it. She was basically accusing Dejanay of doing it. And ironically enough, that was not the actual reckless journalism was not what the WNBA had a problem with. They had a problem with her even being asked about it. Like, there's a reason why the WNBA was seen as a joke up to a point. You're hearing Candace Parker talking about it, talking about how WNBA, like, the players just don't want to hear any criticism. They're scared of any criticism. And the worst player for that is Miss A1 herself. Sorry, like, I will regularly call the NBA to WNBA and vice versa and mix up he, she randomly with doing NBA stuff nonstop, like, especially with how fast I talk. So yeah, but like, it's her. It is Aja Wilson. Like, Aja Wilson, literally, there was a WNBA podcast. I can't even remember what it was called, but it was laughing about how bad Aja Wilson's logo is. And I'm sorry, I know it might mean something. It looks like a bottle opener. Can we not just say that it looks like a bottle opener? Like, I'm sorry, it does. It does. Like, let's not knock on Aja Wilson. It's a bad design. It's a bad design. But yet, Aja Wilson goes and clowns them on social media, and everyone's like, W Aja, oh, these people they don't want to see women succeed. I'm like, I don't really care. At the end of the day, like, for me personally, I want basketball to succeed. I like basketball. I like the NBA. I like the WNBA. I enjoy watching college basketball, both men's and women's. I grew up watching Tulsa Rovers National League and Super League women's teams playing back-to-back, women's game on before, then a men's game. I used to go and watch Tulsa Rovers women's team and men's teams every Saturday night growing up. Like, that was how I spent my weekends. Like, I didn't really care at the time. Basketball was basketball, and I still have that opinion towards the sport. I just like the sport. But at the same time, if me mentioning that Angel Reese is bad at layups suddenly makes me a racist, then they make a mockery of the sport. And I think articles like this not only make a mockery of the sport, they make the actual, like, problems. Because, like, there are obviously big issues when it comes to the WNBA in regards to everything. But when people equate criticism of the game or criticism of a logo or just criticism of an outfit, criticism of a dumb play, of a hilarious play in a game, of the Angel Reese quadruple dribble. Heck, people meme the Caitlyn Clark airball floater, meme that into oblivion. But when people start equating that and making that something else, that's 100 times more serious than just laughing about the sport and memeing about the sport, then when there are actually instances of the things that people are claiming, just joking about the sport it all gets lumped into one. It all gets lumped into one, which is unfortunately what the Wall Street Journal are doing. Like, the Wall Street Journal not even Wall Street Journal, the WNBA media are lumping in, like, the actual racists and the actual, like, horrible fans. Not even fans, horrible people that are watching the league with, I don't know, Iowa fans cheering against their rivals, which is a sports thing. They're lumping all of them in together. And that is where the big issue is. That is where the big issue is that because they're all being lumped together and somebody laughing about Angel Reese's quadruple dribble is seen as an equivalent to some of the worst things you've seen on social media, it's where there's a resentment comes from. It's where you're going to turn people off the league. And it's where the league becomes a joke to people that are watching it from the outside with any form of common sense. And then the fact that people pushing these narratives, not all the time, but quite a bit of the time, are being pushed by the league itself, are going to games with media credentials. It's scandalous. It's absolutely, absolutely scandalous. And I really, really dislike this article. Like, I've got no issue with Aja Wilson and Angel Reese getting an article. I have no issue with the fact that if there wants to be an article talking about how the two of them playing against each other sold out the arena, but to use it, to mention that as the point about the greater growth of the WNBA, and then to try to diminish Caitlyn Clark and basically say the only reason Caitlyn Clark's popular is because of racism. And even though, yes, they said the long 30 footers, but much more implied that it was nothing to do with basketball. I think it's been a year. We need to stop this shit. Like, it's not been a year. It's been a year and a half. And we can't even compare them on the court. Look, Angel Reese is a good basketball player. But, like, she's a top 30 player in the league. Caitlyn Clark just makes the All-W first team. And then what happens? She makes the All-W first team. And then the next day, this crap gets released. I know, obviously, that wasn't timed. But, like, of course it is. Every time something good happens with Caitlyn Clark, something like this happens. Caitlyn Clark goes and win, or like, I'll talk a little bit about it later, but like, every time something good happens with Caitlyn Clark, they make sure, especially like the two people in this picture here, make sure as hell if something good happens with Caitlyn Clark, they want to bring her down a couple of pegs. And I don't think it's their fault in this regard, in this situation. I think it's just the optics are bad when the Wall Street Journal did what they did. Like, my issues with the Wall Street Journal, I have no issue with them making the article. It's just the optics are the optics at the end of the day. Like, I'm not going to show any of it, but yeah, it is what it is.